Alrighty, what we're about to demonstrate is solder transfer technique. And the first thing that we have done is to ensure that both these units, the canine and the central attached to the lateral, fit well. There's absolute stability in these castings. There's no rotation, there's no movement in a facial lingual direction or a mesial distal direction on either of the castings. We've then inspected the actual size of the solder gap between the pontic and the canine. It's a 1/2 millimeter, and it's a uniform 1/2 millimeter. From the perspective of a front view, it's a 1/2 millimeter here at the apical extremity, at the top, the occlusal edge, and in the center. And it's also a 1/2 millimeter if you look at it from the occlusal direction, both on the facial, dead center, and on the palatal sides. So we have a uniform 1/2 millimeter gap. We're now going to paint Duralay into the gap and hold the abutment steady for 7 minutes. Greg, if you'd bring over the powder and liquid, please. And I'm taking a good look at the clock, which is here, beading and flowing Duralay into the joint. Clean the brush so that you don't destroy the brush, and then start timing. And I place one finger on this abutment, one finger on this abutment, and I will hold it for 7 minutes.
I don't think we need to film for 7 minutes.
Yes, we do.
You want to? Okay.
Do you have enough film?
I have 18 minutes worth.
Good. This is a 12-minute procedure. And we are filming for the entire time. You see, students tend to think that 7 minutes lasts about 90 seconds. Now, the point of holding these in position along the long axis is so that there's no movement whatsoever as the Duralay cures. It is, after all, methyl methacrylate, which shrinks upon curing. And if we were to just allow these to air dry with no pressure whatsoever along the abutments, the shrinkage would kick the abutments off the margins and there would be gaps on the sides. Another thing to remember is that Duralay, or any acrylic, in bulk will shrink even more than in a small section. That's why we're only filling the joint to begin with, so that we'll maintain as much dimensional stability as possible during the course of this procedure. We will then lock it together with an overflow of Duralay on the incisal edges going down on the palatal and facial surfaces, but that's a secondary step. Now, another thing that you may have noticed is that the apical extent of this Duralay does not go down to the margins of the canine. It mimics the future solder joint and stays away from the gingival margin. And the reason for that is a technical one. When this bridge is removed and placed in the solder investment, all of the margins must be surrounded and encapsulated in the investment. If any margin is exposed, it can be cooked off by the torch during the soldering process. So we want to keep those protected. If you have a very, very short occlusal height and the solder joint is broader than it is high, and in the process of painting the acrylic actually gets to the finish line, then after it is removed from the mouth, you should take a high-speed burr and or a scalpel and clear away any of the Duralay that's on the margin up to 1 millimeter from the margin, so that that base millimeter can be embedded in the solder investment by the laboratory personnel. And that's 3 minutes. How you doing, Mr. Conan?
Mm-hmm.
Good. It's halftime.
One more minute.
Yep. Thirty seconds. And there we are, end of phase one. Now, I've been reminded to discuss the difference between Duralate and regular jet methyl methacrylate for this purpose. Duralate sets harder. It's less likely that when all is said and done that we're going to have a problem with any distortion or breakage when this is removed. The other thing that I have to make careful note of is the fact that I'm using a camel's hair paintbrush for this process. If you were to use a nylon paintbrush, you'll find it's very difficult to get the Duralate to come right off the brush. And if you take a peek in the mirror, you'll see that what I'm doing is placing Duralate down to the heights of contour on the palatal surfaces of both the pontic and the canine. I'll then build it up over the facial and over the incisal edge, and I want it to be about 1 millimeter thick at least. So the first part of this procedure is to ensure the integrity of the joint, and this phase is to give us enough bulk that we can actually remove the bridge from the mouth without it coming apart into the original two pieces. Any excess Duralay is of no matter, because after the bridge is invested and the torch is used to start to preheat the metal, all of the Duralay burns off. It also burns off cleanly without any ash products, and that's another feature of Duralay. It is designed as a laboratory acrylic for patterns. As you know, we also use it as the primary pattern material for cast, post, and core fabrication for that reason as well. Now, if I just leave the brush in contact with the Duralay, it stays in position and doesn't slump. Then cleaning the brush off again in the monomer. As you can see, it's a nice clean brush. If you keep it clean as you go, you really don't have to worry about buying several of these brushes. They hold up very well over the long run. Now you can take a peek in the mirror from the palatal view. We have plenty of thickness, and we'll augment that on the facial in just a bit. All right, now that's sufficient material to hold everything together for removal. And now I place my fingers back on the abutments, and I'm holding for 5 more minutes.
Should. Is that okay, Joe?
Mm-hmm. Greg, why don't you test this with an Explorer just to show how set up it is at this particular point. Still a little give, right?
A little bit.
All right, and it's been how long?
It's been about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes.
Okay, so you see that further emphasizes why it's really necessary to hold this for 5 so it gets nice and solid. The set time for Duralay is approximately 5 to 6 minutes. That's why I hold the initial for 7. An extra minute isn't going to hurt anything to ensure that this fits. After all, there's been a tremendous amount of effort from the time that you started the preparation through provisionalization and impressions and the wax up and the casting try-in to get this far. When you consider the hours that have been spent of your time and your patient's time up to this point, 1 more minute is relatively insignificant.
I agree.
Time check.
1 more minute.
Okay, I'll get you in for next month. I'm not gonna be able to tell you till next month. Okay, so I will call you then later. What is it? Oh, no, I'm not gonna get off. No, but it's gonna be fun.
30 seconds.
Okay. All right, Mrs. Smith, have a good day. Okay, bye-bye.
And that's that. Okay, very good. Now, we can take a peek, perhaps, at the material on the palatable surface. You can see it incisively. And now we're going to test it, because once we take this out, we don't want to put it back in the mouth. All that could do is potentially distort it or cause the joint to break. But I am going to put a little pressure here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and back and forth, and I don't see any movement or any percolation of saliva bubbles from underneath the margins of the crowns. After it's soldered, we're going to be replacing it and testing it in precisely the same way. If there's been any distortion of this joint, and we push here, and this unit doesn't fit, then saliva will come in. Then we push down, and it bubbles out. There's no bubbling here. So now we'll remove it. Now to get it out easily, I have to remove the clamps. There we go. And now I can reach in, take the units, and just remove like so. And now we take a look, and there is no acrylic within 1 millimeter of the margin along the abutment. And it's solid. And it can now be placed in Sidex and then brought to the laboratory for investing. Here we are with the soldered bridge. As you can see, we still will have to do some adjustment on the palatable surface. There's a little bit of excess metal that will be reduced with an occlusal adjustment. But we're now just trying to check the general fit, place the bridge in, place apical pressure on it, clear off the little bubbles, and now we push on the canine, and there's no movement. We push on the central, there's no movement. We see no bubbling of saliva underneath the margins. We push up and down and can't detect any movement whatsoever. And there we are with a completed project.